Our story begins with Yucha, a girl who seems to think this is still her past life, when I risked everything to beat up the school bully for her. Back then, she told everyone I was just a desperate stalker and even teamed up with that bully to frame me in front of our teacher. That betrayal cost me a disciplinary record and ruined my chances at the college entrance exams, while she, ironically enough, ended up marrying that same bully. But now that I've been reborn, there is no way I'm going to ruin my reputation and future for her sake again. As we find ourselves in the teacher's office, listening to their excuses, I find the whole situation rather laughable compared to my desperate struggles in my previous life. I used to wonder why the teacher never believed me, but I eventually realized this entire interrogation was just a formality from the very start. The bully, Zhao Tianlei, is the dean's son, so any explanation I give is useless. He was never going to be punished anyway. And since Chun Sairu refuses to take my side, it's no surprise when our teacher, Song Wenba, nods after hearing her biased testimony. He dismisses the others and turns to me with a sigh, asking what he's supposed to do with a student like Lin Yufei. He tells me that my grades are decent and asks why I'm failing at such a critical moment in our senior year, even if I do have feelings for Sairu. He insists that hitting someone is wrong and informs me that my punishment is already set, a 1,500-word self-reflection and a school-wide notice. With only 100 days left until the exams, he warns me not to let this mistake ruin my entire life's trajectory. However, I simply look at him without a trace of emotion and tell him that I refuse to comply. This immediately sets Teacher Song off. He glares at me, demanding to know if I realize the gravity of the mistake I've made. He claims I should be grateful the other parents aren't pressing charges and says that disciplinary action will happen whether I write the letter or not. He threatens to call my parents if I won't admit fault, but to be honest, his threats only make me smile this time around. We watch as he pulls up the student records on his computer, finds my mother's phone number, and dials it immediately. Deep down, I truly don't care anymore. Compared to the misery of my past life and failing my exams, this is nothing. Nothing can stop me now, and no matter what he says, I have no intention of apologizing for something I didn't do wrong. I tell him he knows the truth better than anyone, and whether he punishes me or not, I'm done with this conversation. He turns and leaves the office without a second thought. What a joke. As a regressor, he certainly isn't afraid of a teacher's lecture. Now that he's back in his senior year, he refuses to bow his head or admit to mistakes he didn't commit. In his past life, failing the exams was a crushing blow. But now, those exam questions are still vivid in his mind. He vows to reclaim the glory that belongs to him. When he returns to the classroom, the atmosphere is electric. The entire class is buzzing with excitement over his defiance. He tells his classmates he has no intention of writing that letter, then simply sits down and opens his books to begin reviewing. His friend Sun Fei gives him a thumbs up, asking what the teacher said when he refused. Lin Yufei just shrugs and mentions the call to his parents. Hearing this, Chun Sairu actually becomes the nervous one. She immediately pulls him out into the hallway, her face full of feigned concern. She pleads with him, asking why he would reject the teacher's request and risk making a scene. She admits she lied, hoping her apology will soften him. She argues that it's better for only one of them to be punished rather than both. She even has the nerve to ask if he'd actually be happy seeing her get in trouble. He sees his mother waiting there, looking at him with a complex mix of emotions. She clearly never expected her son to be fighting over a girl. In his previous life, he fell for this exact routine and ended up looking like a complete fool. But this time, things are going to be very different. He asks her what happens if he still refuses. He then points out the obvious. If she claims to dislike the bully Zhao Tianlei, why is she protecting him? Sairu frantically tries to explain, claiming she isn't helping the bully. She just doesn't want things to get too complicated. She continues her desperate plea, looking as miserable as possible. She begs him not to let her parents find out and promises to reward him if he helps. Yufei just smiles and asks what exactly she's offering. Biting her lip, she mutters that since he likes her, she'll give him a chance to pursue her. A generous offer, in her mind at least. Yufei bursts out laughing and tells her to save that opportunity for someone else. He turns back to the classroom, done with her games. He was blind in his last life, but he has no intention of staying blind in this one. Why choose a fake lotus when he could find a real heart of gold? Suddenly, a memory flashes in his mind. At this time, that other girl should still be getting bullied at the school next door. Shortly after, the teacher calls him back. At this moment, he sees his mother looking at him with a rather complicated expression. Clearly, she never expected her child to get into a fight over something like young love. After all, for a very long time, he had been the quintessential good student, obedient, quiet, and consistently at the top of his class. The teacher tells him he's already briefed his mother, Hyakin, who sighs and pulls her son into a corner of the office to talk. We see him lean in to whisper the truth to his mother, finally pulling out his phone to show her the messages from Chun Sairu. Yakin is visibly shaken as she realizes her son was framed. Her anger flares up the moment she confirms he was wronged. Shocked that a girl could lie so boldly, his mother immediately thrusts the phone in front of the teacher, Song Wenba, to protest. She argues that her son didn't lie. He didn't just stumble upon a social media post. The girl specifically asked him for help. Teacher Song stares at the screen in disbelief, clearly not expecting such definitive proof of the conversation to exist. Even so, the teacher grits his teeth and insists that while the lying is wrong, the fact remains that Lin Yufei used his fists. He argues that since the victim is an athlete, any injury could ruin his exams, and then turns his lecture back toward Yufei. The teacher claims he only wants Yufei to reflect on the violence, insisting that regardless of the provocation, hitting someone is always wrong. He suggests that setting the girl's lies aside, Yufei is still at fault, a statement that makes our protagonist laugh in total disbelief. To be honest, it's impressive a teacher could even say that. Yufei asks if, by setting facts aside, he might actually be the first emperor. He points out the fault lies with the others, so if he's being punished, all three should face a public disciplinary notice together. Teacher Song is now fuming, shouting about how the boy shows no remorse and has the nerve to talk back to his superiors. He decides a 1,500-word apology isn't enough. Now it must be 3,000 words, plus a school-wide public shaming. Yufei just smiles and retorts that they both know the bully, Zhao Tianlei, won't be punished, questioning if Song even deserves to teach. The teacher stands up abruptly, roaring in anger that Yufei has lost all respect and is now openly insulting his own instructor. Song turns to the mother, declaring he's done trying to handle this attitude, and insists they take the matter to the dean's office. Yufei scoffs, knowing the dean's office is useless since Zhao Tianlei is the dean's son. The man would never let his own child suffer. This revelation causes an absolute explosion of tension, and half an hour later, we find them all standing in the dean's private office. Dean Luchong keeps a stony face as he criticizes them, claiming he already heard everything that happened in the teacher's office and confirming if Yakin is indeed the mother. He suggests they set aside who is right or wrong for a moment to focus on the boy's attitude, noting that the homeroom teacher was so upset his heart began to ache. The dean scoffs at the idea that he'd favor his own son, insisting that if his boy made a mistake, he would be criticized, scolded, and beaten just the same. He promises to deal with his son later, but first, he demands that Yufei apologize to the teacher and read a 3,000-word confession in front of the entire school. The situation is far too serious in his eyes. He claims that if Yufei cannot recognize his errors and change, the school simply won't be able to teach him anymore. Hearing that final threat, Yakin is instantly gripped by worry, asking the dean if he truly intends to expel her son right in the middle of his senior year. Dean Luchong remains ill-tempered, pointing out that the boy has no respect for authority and even had the audacity to say his teacher was unfit for the job. He asks how they are supposed to educate such a student, claiming they are truly powerless, while Yakin tries to explain that her son is merely a bit stubborn. Before she can finish, Yufei suddenly interrupts, telling his mother it's no big deal and that if they aren't welcome here, they should simply transfer schools. He remarks that he's tired of this place anyway and suggests the nearby second high school might be better, which leaves Dean Luchong absolutely fuming with rage. The dean points a trembling finger at Yufei, telling his mother that this is the final warning. The boy either reflects on his mistakes or he leaves the school for good. Yufei just smiles, deciding he's done with this prestigious school. Soon, the news of his defiance spreads, and the entire class is buzzing with the shocking update. His classmates think he's lost his mind, wondering how he'll handle the college entrance exams if he transfers now, and they urge him to just write the apology. Several of his closer friends come over to advise him, reminding him that the exams are a life-altering event that he shouldn't throw away over a simple grudge. They mention the teacher is willing to let it go if he writes the 3,000 words and apologizes. Otherwise, even their chemistry class will be canceled. Lu Zian speaks up with total annoyance, asking why the whole class has to suffer and lose their lessons just because Yufei refuses to apologize for his fight. She points out that Shin Sairu said the teacher wasn't even angry anymore until Yufei started the argument, which is now dragging Sairu into the punishment as well. Zian asks if he's happy now that Sairu has to call her parents to school, noting that the poor girl is already in tears because of the mess he's caused. She mentions Sairu's parents are already on their way and questions his manhood for making a girl cry, but suddenly, the entire room falls into a heavy silence. Vice Principal Gua Haiba clears his throat twice before speaking, asking for Lin Yufei to step outside as the rest of the students watch on in total suspense. With a complicated look in his eyes, Yufei follows Vice Principal Gua Haiba out to the hallway, expecting a civil conversation. Instead, he is met with a verbal onslaught, as Gua insists that even if a teacher is wrong, a student has no right to speak back. The vice principal asks if Yufei thinks he's special just because of his grades, before roaring that the school doesn't need students like him. He makes it clear that if Yufei doesn't want to be there, he should simply stop coming. As the threat of expulsion hangs in the air, Chun Sairu's parents finally arrive, though they seem more interested in shifting blame than listening. Sairu's mother points a finger at Yufei, calling him a nobody and accusing him of lying about her daughter's involvement. She demands he be moved to another class to stop him from harassing Sairu, a claim that leaves Yufei's mother absolutely fuming. Before his mother can argue, Yufei speaks up, calmly stating he will drop out and promising her that his grades will only improve elsewhere. The physics teacher, Qin Shui, sighs deeply, mentioning a prestigious competition next month that she had planned to recommend him for. It was a golden opportunity where, given his high level, he likely would have earned extra points for his college entrance exams. Since there is only one spot per class, his departure means it must go to someone else, prompting Cyru's mother to shamelessly interject. Hearing about the extra points, she asks if her daughter can take the spot instead, hoping Cyru might have a chance at the prize. Teacher Chin gives an awkward smile, gently noting that Cyru's physics grades are, to be honest, quite average. 2 days later, we see Yufei approaching his homeroom teacher with his formal withdrawal papers in hand. He asks for the final signature required to make his departure official. Yufei offers one last deal. If the teacher apologizes now, he'll stay and win the chemistry competition for him, sharing the credit. Teacher Song Wenba's face turns dark with rage as he snaps, telling Yufei to get out while immediately signing the papers. He instructs the boy to take the form to the dean's office and then to the principal, which Yufei does without a moment's delay. The dean signs the papers with a mocking remark, and finally, Yufei makes his way to the highest office in the school. This time, he is looking for Principal Zhang. Taking a deep breath, he enters and introduces himself to submit his final application. Yufei hands over the withdrawal form, asking for a signature, while Principal Lu Xinyun frowns as he begins to read through the document. The reason listed is a conflict with the English teacher making study impossible. The principal asks if he's the student who defied his teachers. Principal Lu Xinyun feels a brief flicker of regret, as it truly is a shame for a student with such good grades to simply walk away. However, he tells himself that a student who fights and shows no respect for the dean simply cannot stay. Meanwhile, Yufei's lips curl into a slight smile. A sudden spark of inspiration hits him, and he mentions hearing that the school is applying for provincial key status, offering his help for a price. He suggests that if the homeroom teacher and the dean apologize, he might reconsider, prompting Principal Lu to roll his eyes in disbelief. It is the first time anyone has dared to make demands of him. He finds the boy's arrogance and lack of respect for authority utterly staggering. Without another word, the principal signs the papers, and Yufei returns to the classroom to pack his things while his seatmate, Sun Fei, sighs deeply. Sun Fei laments that his life is ruined since he'll have no one to copy homework from, earning him a playful glare and a scolding from Yufei. Sun Fei explains that he tries to learn, but it just doesn't stick. We recall that in his past life, Sun Fei was one of Yufei's few true friends. They had even ended up in the same city for university after Yufei messed up his entrance exams, maintaining their bond through the years. It was Sun Fei who eventually broke the news that Chun Sairu and Zhao Tianlei were dating, a relationship that moved quite quickly after graduation. They had invited many classmates to their wedding, leaving Yufei as the only fool in the room, a memory that seems almost comical to him now. Back in the present, Sun Fei glances toward Chun Sairu and whispers some gossip he heard about her mother's recent visit to the classroom. Apparently, her mother asked the other students to keep an eye out and ensure Yufei didn't harass her daughter anymore, which is quite the accusation. Yufei simply laughs it off, noting that it doesn't matter since he's transferring anyway, just as the final school bell rings out across the campus. As everyone begins to pack, Yufei prepares to leave this school behind, but a hesitant voice calls out to him from the doorway. It is Chun Sairu, claiming she never intended to hurt him. Seeing him actually drop out seems to have stirred a small, lingering spark of conscience. Yufei turns back with an expressionless face, admitting that her lies to the teacher truly angered him, as he never expected her to be that kind of person. Sairu looks ready to cry, insisting she would never hurt him on purpose, but as Yufei looks at her, he feels something shifting deep inside. Deep down, he realizes that old spark of affection is gone. Her explanations are nothing more than a thin veil for her true nature, and he can't help but feel a surge of contempt. He tells her she was pathetic for siding with Zhao Tianlei, and without another word, he turns and walks away, finally releasing words he had held back for a lifetime. For years, even during their wedding in his past life, he had imagined this confrontation countless times, though back then, it was nothing more than a bitter fantasy. To be honest, being reborn feels incredible. He no longer has to live a life of quiet frustration. Upon returning home, the first thing he does is open his computer. He logs into the first high school forum to find his own thread, posting a sincere apology stating that due to personal reasons, he must withdraw and stop his updates. Over the past few days, we see that he had been spending his spare time writing a web novel on the school forum, mostly just to test if he had any literary talent. He never expected his transfer to happen so suddenly, but since he is leaving First High behind, there is no reason to continue the story there. Which, naturally, is why he takes a moment to offer his readers a formal apology before moving on to the next chapter of his own life. As soon as the news of the hiatus breaks, a wave of comments from fans floods the thread, all of them begging for an early return to the story. Seeing the messages, Yufei can't help but smile, realizing he might actually have a gift for this. Before we know it, Monday arrives, and his transfer to Second High is official. While the teaching staff at Second High is comparable to his old school, their university admission rate is slightly lower, a small price to pay for a fresh start. His father, currently behind the wheel, wears a stern expression as he scolds Yufei for the trouble he's caused, even giving his grandfather a scare with this sudden move. The car soon pulls up to the gates of second high, thanks to his solid grades. The enrollment process is completed in no time at all. He is assigned to class 3 to 4, the top science class in the school, where the homeroom teacher, Liang Yuding, also happens to be an English teacher. The dean introduces Yufei and his impressive academic history to Ms. Liang before heading back to his office, leaving the boy with his new mentor. It is then that Yufei makes a small, specific request. He asks if he can sit next to a student named Wenmengqi, catching Ms. Liang off guard. When asked if he knows her, he simply explains she was a former classmate. Ms. Liang smiles and agrees as they make their way toward the classroom. They arrive to find the math teacher overseeing a test. After a polite nod, Ms. Liang leads Yufei inside to face his new peers. With a warm smile, she introduces him as their new transfer student, then steps aside to let Yufei introduce himself to the room. He tells them his name is Lin Yufei and claims his grades are only average, but adds with a wink that he's a man of high character who never gets into fights. Beside him, Ms. Liang can barely suppress a chuckle before announcing that Yufei is officially joining their class, and for the time being, he will be sitting next to Wenmengqi. As the words leave her lips, a quiet girl with glasses looks up and steals a quick glance at him. This is actually the first time Yufei has seen Mingqi in person, and he immediately notices her reserved, almost timid nature. She seems like the quiet type. She is the kind of girl who doesn't quite know how to socialize, and might even be picked on by others, the type who stays under the radar in class. To be honest, these are the students who have no presence at all, yet everyone realizes their worth only long after graduation. He takes the initiative to walk over, moving his desk and chair right next to Mingqi. As he settles in, the math teacher hands him a test paper. The teacher suggests he give it a try since they'll be reviewing it tomorrow, and Yufei politely agrees. But then, the bell rings for the end of class. Suddenly, our new transfer student becomes like an animal on display at a zoo, with students even from the next class crowding the hallway to watch. The whispers and pointing begin immediately. Some say they heard from cousins at his old school that he fought an athlete and talked back to a teacher. Others claim he was forced to leave because he got into a fight over a girl who didn't even like him back, a classic case of unrequited obsession. They laugh, calling him a pathetic simp. Yufei never imagined that even after transferring, the shadow of Chun Sairu would follow him here. Despite the rumors, the physics representative, Wei Yingjia, walks up to greet him, commenting on how hardcore it was to get expelled for fighting. A rather pretty classmate named Shin Xinyue joins in with a smile, teasing Yingjia for not knowing the full story. She claims he fought an athlete while chasing the school beauty, and since that athlete was the teacher's son, he was forced to transfer. Which, naturally, is how the rumors have already painted a very specific picture of him before he's even finished his first hour. Yufei can only grimace, realizing his fresh start hasn't quite wiped the slate clean. His past caught up to him before his seat even got warm. Xinyue blinks and suddenly asks, with a hint of mischief, if he'd like to give up on Sairu and try pursuing her instead. The surrounding students burst into laughter, reminding her she already has Zheng Yansong, but she quickly retorts that she never said yes to him. She admits she likes top students. Someone ranked top 10 at first high will surely be top 3 here. Plus, she finds his sense of humor charming. She points out the irony, a top scholar claiming to be average, and a fighter claiming he never gets into trouble. She watches him with genuine interest. Xinyue continues her playful interrogation, asking how he feels about her, or perhaps she should pursue him instead since he seems exactly like her type. She adds that unlike Sairu, she would be moved to tears if someone fought for her. Yufei takes a moment to really look at Xinyue. She is certainly a beauty by high school standards, the kind who will be a campus star in college. But then, a sudden voice interrupts the mood. The voice mocks him, calling him a simp who fought for a girl who didn't even like him, only to end up expelled for his stupidity. Zheng Yansong glares at Yufei with a clear warning to stay away from Xinyue before leading a group of students out to play basketball. In his past life, Yufei might have been intimidated by such a boastful threat, especially coming from someone who looks like a typical delinquent. But now, seeing these students acting so tough feels almost comical to him. To be honest, it's hard to take this teenage drama seriously anymore. He knows from experience that the cool kids in class often turn out to be quite ordinary once they graduate and enter the real world. Even the popular girls often end up with very different lives than they imagined. With that thought, he turns his attention back to his neighbor. He looks at Wenmengqi, who is quietly focused on her homework, and decides his clumsy little heiress is much more his speed. Leaning on his desk, he tentatively asks if she has heard the rumors about him too. Mengqi freezes for a moment, then slowly shakes her head. Relieved, he suggests they start fresh and introduces himself as Lin Yufei. Mengqi looks at him nervously, then glances toward the door where Yansong left. She asks if he really knows how to fight. He denies it, claiming they're just rumors, but she tells him he needs to be careful. When he asks why, she explains with genuine concern that Zheng Yansong might try to hit him. Yufei realizes she's talking about the boy from earlier. She reminds him that Yansong likes Xinyue, but Yufei remains unbothered, telling her it's not a big deal. Then, he changes the subject entirely. He suddenly asks if she has a boyfriend. The question leaves Mingqi stunned, staring at the transfer student in disbelief before shaking her head. His eyes light up as he asks what she thinks of him and if she'd like to be with him. Poor Mingqi is so startled her face turns bright red. stuttering with nerves. She claims she has a math problem she needs to ask the teacher about and quickly gathers her things. As she hurries out, Yufei realizes that with her shy personality, she likely hasn't been approached so directly before. He's definitely scared her a little. And yet, he finds himself looking forward to what's next. It seems life at second high is going to be very interesting indeed. How interesting. It isn't until the class bell finally rings that when Mengqi nervously returns to the classroom, keeping her head down as she clutches her papers. She returns to her seat, clearly overwhelmed by that sudden confession. She is far too shy to know how to respond to such directness. Soon after, the English teacher enters the room, glancing at Yufei with a serious expression before addressing the entire class about the recent gossip. She makes it clear that regardless of his past, he is now a member of their class, and she won't tolerate students whispering behind each other's backs. With that settled, teacher Liang Yuding hands out reading comprehension papers, planning to go over the answers once everyone has finished their work. It seems Liang Yuding had heard the rumors about Yufei's transfer and chose this moment to subtly defend him while reprimanding the troublemakers. As the lesson proceeds, we see Yufei make a pleasant discovery. His English level completely eclipses that of a standard high school student. Though he had struggled during his original college entrance exams, he eventually passed the level 6 English test during his university years. Consequently, his vocabulary, grasp of grammar, and reading skills are far superior to his peers, making this difficult assignment feel like child's play. After finishing the test, he finds he only missed a single question. In his past life, a bad day meant scoring only 112 points. He tells himself that while a normal performance back then was 125, this time around, he is confident he can break the 140-point barrier. After all, he has two massive advantages: years of grueling university study and the fact that he actually remembers the future exam questions. Teacher Liang Yuding interrupts his thoughts, announcing that it's time to check the answers for the 25 questions on the sheet. She asks for a show of hands from anyone who missed 5 questions or fewer, and several students promptly raise their hands in the air. Yufei notes that 8 out of the 48 students qualify, suggesting that the academic level here at second high is quite competitive. When the teacher narrows it down to 4 mistakes or fewer, 3 students lower their hands, leaving only 5 people still holding firm. These are clearly the top English students in the class, though we see a familiar face among them that catches Yufei by surprise. Shen Xinyue, the girl who was just flirting with him, is still holding her hand up, proving she is more than just a pretty face. When the threshold drops to 3 mistakes, only one person is left standing. Teacher Liang smiles and asks Xinyue exactly how many she missed. Xinyue proudly reports she only missed 2, earning a nod of approval from the teacher, who notes that this particular test was exceptionally difficult. The test was compiled from past college entrance exams. Teacher Liang Yuding suddenly glances at Yufei and asks curiously about his English performance. She assumes his grades shouldn't be bad and asks how many he missed. Immediately, every head in the room turns toward him, waiting for an answer. Thinking it best to keep a low profile as a new student, he casually replies that he missed quite a few and didn't perform well today. The teacher tells him not to worry, noting that his seatmate Wen Mengqi is quite good at English and can help him with anything he doesn't understand. Wen Mengqi immediately tenses up, nervously claiming she isn't very good at teaching. Clearly, Yufei's earlier boldness has left her too intimidated to even look at him. Shen Xinyue, however, jumps at the chance, smiling as she volunteers her services as the English class representative to help the new student. After speaking, she gives Yufei a wink and what she considers a charming smile. To her surprise, he politely declines, saying Mengqi will be enough. But just then, Zhang Yinsong speaks up from his seat with a lazy, arrogant tone, mocking the idea of Yufei being a top student. He scoffs that missing over 5 questions means Yufei likely won't even break 120 points, questioning if the top students from first high are actually impressive. Shen Xinyue rolls her eyes at Yinsong, realizing he is intentionally targeting the newcomer. She points out that overall grades aren't defined by a single subject. She argues that he might excel in math or Chinese, noting that Yinsong himself has lopsided grades. Teacher Liang steps in to calm the class down. She reminds them that second high is just as capable as any other school. This reminds her that there is an English-speaking competition next week. There are 3 spots per class, and she invites interested students to sign up for this district-wide competition. It is a serious challenge, to be sure. The test requires a vocabulary beyond the standard high school level, focusing on extracurricular knowledge. Success brings more than just a certificate. There is prize money involved, and a strong performance would bring great honor to second high. Naturally, the competitive spirit in the room begins to stir. It is a chance to compete against the entire district and prove their worth on a much larger stage. Yinsong argues that giving a spot to Yufei would be unfair to the other students. Yufei finds this amusing and asks if Yinsong is targeting him specifically. Yinsong denies it, claiming that since there are only 3 spots, they must be selective to ensure they send the very best representatives. He insists they need the most excellent students to bring glory to the school. Teacher Liang Yuding smiles and offers a practical solution to the debate. She suggests they first see how many people sign up. If it's only 3, there's no need for conflict. If there are more, they will hold a selection. And so, the matter of the selection was settled. As Liang Yuding prepared to leave, she made a point of walking over to Yufei's desk to ask if she could take a quick look at his test paper. Since he was a new transfer student, teacher Liang wasn't entirely sure of his English level yet. She wanted to see how he had actually performed to understand his true standing. She wanted to know how to best help him improve later on. Yufei paused for a moment before handing it over, adding with a grin that she should definitely pick him for the speaking competition. Teacher Liang just laughed and said they would see. However, the very next second, as she flipped through his paper, she froze in place. The entire test was practically flawless. He had only missed a single multiple-choice question. She looked at him in confusion, asking why he claimed to have done poorly when he only had one mistake. Naturally, this caught everyone's attention. In an instant, every student in the class widened their eyes and turned to stare at him. Yufei, looking perfectly sincere, let out a heavy sigh and explained that a single mistake was already hard for him to accept. To him, anything less than a perfect score felt like a failure. The classroom immediately erupted into a frenzy of whispers and shocked reactions at such a bold statement. Shun Xinyue, the English representative, was so excited she covered her mouth in disbelief, marveling at the top student's skill. Meanwhile, Zheng Yinsong's expression twitched with irritation. He glanced at his own paper and gritted his teeth, muttering that Yufei was just showing off. Teacher Liang, however, couldn't help but smile warmly at her new student's high standards. She teased him for not raising his hand earlier when he was clearly so capable, encouraging him to keep up the good work. Seeing his actual score had finally put her mind at ease. The administration had told her he was a top-tier student, but for a moment, she had genuinely worried that English might be his weak point while his other subjects were stronger. Now it was clear that his English proficiency was, at the very least, quite exceptional. It seems our protagonist was being a bit too modest, doesn't it? Just as Yufei was putting his paper away, he overheard a female student behind him complaining about a story update. She asked Xinyue why the novel she recommended had stopped updating. The two girls immediately huddled around Xinyue to discuss the web novel from the first high forum. Even the shy one Mengqi pulled out her phone to check the forum herself. Sure enough, there was a notice that the updates had paused. Feeling a bit curious, Yufei leaned in and asked Mengqi if she was reading it as well. Mengqi bit her lip and gave a cautious little nod. When he asked if it was any good, she nodded again, softly admitting that she found it very interesting. Yufei smiled with a sense of secret satisfaction, though he casually remarked that he thought the story was only average. This comment was immediately overheard by Jiang Shiqi, who was sitting in front of them. Shiqi turned around to look at the top student from first high and asked curiously if he knew anything about the author, since he had just transferred from that very school. Yufei acted surprised, asking if everyone was really reading it. Mengqi answered in a small voice, explaining that their teacher, Mr. Luo, was the one who had introduced it to them. Shiqi clarified that Mr. Luo was their Chinese teacher, and he had mentioned the story to the class just a few days ago. It seems the story's reach was wider than Yufei expected. Shiqi explained that their teacher had mentioned during class how a novel on the First High Forum was quite interesting, which naturally piqued everyone's curiosity. After checking it out, they found it truly fascinating. It seems First High is full of talent if someone there can write a story like that. Suddenly, everything clicked for Yufei. He finally understood why his novel had so many readers. It turns out a teacher had given him a helping hand. With a slight smile, he decided to ask for the teacher's opinion during Chinese class. If all went well, he might even try to become a signed author online. Just then, Shun Xinyue called out loudly, asking if their new classmate Yufei happened to know the person writing that story back at First High. In an instant, every eye in the room was fixed on him. They were all curious if a top 10 student like him might actually know the author. Yufei simply smiled and admitted that he did, indeed, know the person, a statement that immediately sent a wave of excitement through his classmates. They gushed about how the story would surely be a hit if it were turned into a TV drama, marveling at the author's incredible talent. Yufei, enjoying the moment of mystery, chuckled softly and remarked that they were perhaps being a bit too generous with their praise. Noticing that even when Mengqi was looking at him like a curious child, he promised to get the full story and tell them all later. The others could only sigh as they returned to their seats, but the bell soon rang, signaling the start of their Chinese lesson. Their teacher, Mr. Luo Wenxuan, entered the classroom and immediately asked where the new student was, prompting Yufei to raise his hand. Mr. Luo nodded, noting that he recognized Yufei from the first high rankings, though he recalled that Chinese was actually the boy's weakest subject. Yufei admitted that classical prose and reading comprehension were his struggles. Even during the college entrance exams, his Chinese score had been quite average. He had only managed a 114, which he considered a modest result. As the lesson began, however, Yufei's attention started to wander toward his seatmate. He whispered to Mengqi that her handwriting was beautiful and elegant, just like her, adding that she would likely look stunning without her glasses. Poor Mengqi, having no experience with boys flirting, could only bite her lip in shy silence, completely unsure of how to respond. She kept her head down, pretending not to hear him, and seeing her so focused on her studies, Yufei decided it was best not to disturb her further. Instead, he pulled out his phone to work on his novel until the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the period. However, Mr. Luo walked down from the podium and glanced at Yufei's phone, his expression darkening as he realized the boy had been playing on it all hour. Suddenly, the surrounding students all looked on as if they were watching a play. Those sitting nearby had seen everything. The top student from First High had been playing on his phone all class, and naturally, he finally got caught. With a stern face, Mr. Luo Wenxuan ordered him to step outside, leaving the classroom buzzing with a flurry of whispers. Out in the hallway, Mr. Luo demanded to know why he was playing on his phone when Chinese was his weakest subject. Yufei simply smiled and explained that it wasn't actually a weakness. He had been doing it on purpose to make a request. He asked if he could be allowed to write during class from now on, leaving Mr. Luo confused by the suggestion. Yufei handed over his phone, and as the teacher took a look, he froze. He recognized the story immediately. Yufei revealed that he was the one writing the novel on the forum, and he had been working on an update. Looking closely at the account, Mr. Luo realized it was indeed the author. He was utterly stunned by the revelation. He took a sharp breath as his stern expression melted into one of genuine admiration and a warm, appreciative smile. After all, he truly loved the story himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't have recommended it to his students in the first place. Still, Mr. Luo noted that even though the writing was excellent, he couldn't just let the boy ignore the lessons. He frowned and muttered that it wasn't possible unless Yufei could take first place in the upcoming four-school joint exam. Yufei asked if he meant first in total score or just Chinese, and Mr. Luo confirmed it was the latter. If Yufei could score a 135 or higher, the teacher would consider it. Without a second thought, Yufei agreed to the deal. They made a pact. If Yufei took the top spot in Chinese during the joint exam, he could write his novel in class. When asked if he was sure, Yufei grinned and replied that he was absolutely certain he could pull it off. The joint exam involved the 4 major high schools in the city, all using the exact same test papers for the ranking. While First High and Huashi were the top contenders, Second High and Experimental High usually followed further behind. Although these scores weren't the final college entrance results, the rankings served as a very important reference for the future. We see that those who excel in the joint exams are considered the top candidates for key universities. Meanwhile, Mr. Luo Wenxuan asked one last curious question. He noted that the novel was quite well written and suggested Yufei consider signing up for the new concept writing competition. Yufei's eyes lit up at the suggestion. He asked if it was the national contest hosted by Manga Literature, and Mr. Luo nodded, asking if he wanted to give it a try. The teacher mentioned that several students from First High had already signed up for private tutoring, a topic that had come up in a recent school meeting. Initially, the school hadn't planned to participate because the national level is so difficult, but Mr. Luo felt that Yufei actually had a real chance. With a slight smile, Yufei asked if winning would help the school's reputation in its bid to become a provincial model school. Mr. Luo was surprised the boy understood such things, confirming it would certainly help put Second High on the map if he succeeded. Yufei agreed to sign up, and Mr. Luo laughed, telling the boy he'd be waiting for those joint exam results before sending him back to class. As an afterthought, the teacher asked when the next update was coming. Yufei promised one for tomorrow before returning to a swarm of gossiping classmates. They crowded around him, eager to know what the teacher had said, but before he could even sit down, Mr. Luo suddenly stepped back into the room. He announced there was one more thing he had forgotten to mention to the class. Though the question seemed a bit vague, Yufei simply nodded with a smile, and as soon as the teacher left, Jiang Shiqi turned around to investigate. She demanded to know what that was all about, but Yufei just shrugged, claiming he'd simply asked the teacher not to bother him during class. He explained the deal. If he took first place in Chinese during the four-school exam, he'd have his freedom. Jiang Shiqi's eyes widened in pure shock. She couldn't believe he was aiming for first in the whole school, and even when Mingqi sat there completely stunned by her desk mate's ambition. Just moments ago, he was asking her for help with Chinese, and now he was aiming for the top spot. Yufei told him to keep it quiet, just in case. He admitted he might not actually make it, then realized his stomach was growling and wondered why they hadn't gone to the cafeteria yet. Jiang Shiqi explained that Mengqi was waiting for him since he didn't have a meal card. Yufei teased her, noting how kind she was being to him. When Mengqi's ears turned bright red, and she silently pulled her lunchbox from her desk. Later that afternoon, the endless cycle of practice exams continued. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message from Sun Fei, asking if he had really moved to Class 4. Yufei was surprised Sun had found out so quickly. Sun Fei was shocked to learn that photos of Yufei at Second High had already been posted on the school forums, with everyone asking why he had transferred. It turns out Chen Sairu's classmates were in that same group. Shen Xinyue had already filled him in, mentioning that the novel Yufei posted was becoming a hit. Sun Fei admitted he thought he was seeing things at first, as the story blew up after only 4 chapters, and now everyone was demanding an update. While the general public didn't know the author's identity, Sun suspected Sairu did, especially since the head teacher had just come by asking for the writer. Apparently, some provincial officials visiting for an open class had stumbled upon the novel and, surprisingly enough, couldn't stop praising it. The principal even wanted to add it to the school library as a commemorative piece, leading Sun to ask if he should tell the teachers the truth. Although the author remained a mystery to most, Shin Sairu took it upon herself to visit Mr. Song Wenba's office to claim she knew the secret. Mr. Song was delighted, noting that he always suspected the author was one of their own students and that she had arrived at the perfect moment. He explained that the Education Bureau leaders were highly impressed, and now the principal wanted to capitalize on this sudden literary success. The plan was to start a school literary society and have the mystery students share their writing insights, assuming, of course, they were from their class. Sairu hesitated for a heartbeat before nodding, prompting Mr. Song to lean in with a smile, eager to finally hear the name of their rising star. She remained silent, torn between revealing the truth and the fact that Yufei had already left the school, when Vice Principal Gua Haiba suddenly called. Mr. Song confidently assured the vice principal that the student was indeed in his class, sounding quite certain for a man who didn't have a name yet. After hanging up, he realized Sairu still hadn't spoken and turned back to her, his eyes full of anticipation as he pressed her for the answer. Sairu began to stammer, looking visibly uncomfortable as she suggested to the teacher that perhaps they should just drop the whole matter. Mr. Song laughed off her hesitation, jokingly asking if she was the author herself, which sent a wave of nervous panic through the poor girl. He encouraged her to speak up, promising that the school wasn't looking to punish anyone, but rather to offer their full support and encouragement. Finally, feeling the weight of the pressure, she whispered a single name, Lin Yufei. Upon hearing it, Mr. Song froze in absolute disbelief. He asked her to repeat it, unable to process that Yufei wrote the viral story, but Sairu confirmed the account used to post it was definitely his. Mr. Song's head began to spin as he struggled to reconcile this news, knowing that Yufei's grades in Chinese had always been, well, less than stellar. His essays were always so average, so how could it be him? Shin Sairu, feeling a bit guilty, admitted she didn't know either, but the account definitely belonged to Lin Yufei. She had even double-checked their old chat logs to be sure. Upon hearing this, Mr. Song Wenba rubbed his head, feeling as though the universe was playing a cruel joke on him. He asked her why she hadn't spoken up sooner, specifically, before he had taken that phone call from Vice Principal Gua. To be honest, the timing couldn't have been worse. He had spent ages boasting that the student was in his class, and now that student was gone. Fortunately, the Education Bureau hadn't asked for a meeting yet, or he'd be in real trouble. Sairu lowered her head, looking quite pitiful as she apologized, explaining that she had been afraid to speak since Yufei had already dropped out of school. Mr. Song was so frustrated he could barely think. To make matters worse, he had already bragged in the teacher's group chat that the author was one of his own. It was a complete embarrassment. The student he was supposed to honor and encourage was the very same one he had argued with before they left the school. Gritting his teeth, Mr. Song decided that since the story had stopped updating anyway, they should all just pretend they didn't know who the author was. He planned to invent an excuse for the school leaders, and he strictly warned Sairu not to tell a soul that Yufei was the writer. Just keep it a secret. Sairu looked like she wanted to argue, but she held her tongue. Mr. Song massaged his temples to calm down before finally trying to fix the mess he'd made. He eventually called Vice Principal Gua Haiba back, sounding incredibly apologetic as he claimed he had finally spoken with the mysterious student in question. He lied, saying the student had actually plagiarized the story from somewhere else and had run out of content, which was why they were too embarrassed to come forward. After hanging up, Mr. Song let out a massive sigh of relief. However, to be safe, he knew he had to ensure no other students would let the truth slip out. He decided he had to go to the classroom immediately to tell everyone to stop discussing the matter. And so, a few moments later, we see him at the door. The English teacher was just about to start the lesson when Mr. Song interrupted with a forced smile, signaling that he had a brief announcement for the class. He told them to forget about that novel on the school forum, claiming the principal said that since the updates had stopped, they should just let it go. He urged them not to mention the author's name even if they knew it, and to focus entirely on their studies instead, especially with the four-school joint exams approaching. He encouraged them to aim for high scores, but just as he turned to leave, a student suddenly shouted out that something was wrong with the teacher's story. The student announced that the novel had just been updated 5 minutes ago. Mr. Song felt a jolt of pure shock, as if he'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. He stood there frozen, wondering if it was true, while the rest of the class immediately pulled out their phones to check the forum for themselves. And so, that novel on the school forum, which everyone assumed was dead after the author dropped out, suddenly updated with a brand new chapter after days of silence. Mr. Song, clearly losing his composure, barked at the class to hand over their phones after the lesson. The students sat there, utterly stunned and terrified by his sudden outburst. It wasn't until Mr. Song Wenba finally left that the room erupted into a cold sweat of whispers, wondering why their teacher had suddenly snapped. Meanwhile, Sun Fei seemed to have guessed the truth. With a faint, knowing smile, he glanced over at Chun Sairu and noticed her expression was also quite troubled. He immediately sent a secret message to our protagonist to fill him in. As he relayed everything that had just happened, we returned to the office where Mr. Song was massaging his head in a panic, wondering how on earth he was going to fix this. He had just finished telling everyone the story was over, and then that brat went and updated it. To be honest, the timing was almost impressively bad. If he admitted the author was the student who dropped out, he'd be confessing to his own lie. But if he stayed silent, what would he do when the school leaders asked to meet the writer? In a moment of desperate inspiration, Mr. Song Winba decided to call the dean, Lu Chong, to discuss the mess regarding the forum novel and the claims he had made. Lu Chong couldn't help but snap back, asking why he hadn't just said the student dropped out instead of making up that ridiculous story about plagiarism. Now that the story was updating again, the dean made it clear he wanted no part of the explanation. Gritting his teeth, Mr. Song decided to play his trump card. He threatened to reveal that the dean's own son had started a fight and conspired with a female student to force Lin Yufei out of the school. A bold move, certainly. The phone line went deathly silent for a moment before Lu Chong asked, in a chillingly cold tone, what exactly it was that Mr. Song wanted from him. Mr. Song suggested they contact the forum moderator, claim the story was a distraction to the students, and simply have Lin Yufei's account deleted or banned entirely. Meanwhile, over at the second middle school, word had already spread that the novel was back. We see dozens of students pulling out their phones to check the latest update. Just then, the physics class representative, Wei Yingjia, ran over to Yufei and asked if he could use his connection to the author to request a fixed update schedule. He was praising how well written the story was when suddenly, when Mengqi let out a cry of shock, the story was gone, just like that. Everyone was left in a state of total confusion. One moment they were reading, and the next, the post had been deleted. It was a rather abrupt end to their entertainment. Yufei frowned, sensing something was wrong. He checked his own account and confirmed the post was indeed gone, prompting him to let out a dry, mocking laugh. He remarked on how impressive the effort was to wipe him out completely. Jiang Shiqi asked him what he meant, but just as he was about to explain, he noticed the math teacher had already arrived at the classroom door. He quickly tried to message Sun Fei, only to find that Sun Fei had already messaged him first. Sun Fei's message warned him that the post had been deleted, and he suspected the homeroom teacher was behind it, especially since the teacher had just forbidden any further discussion. At that moment, the math teacher cleared his throat at the front of the room, reminding everyone about Friday's for-school joint exam, which would involve swapping classrooms for the test. He urged them to take it seriously before handing out 2 practice papers, explaining that he had compiled some questions from the math section of a previous joint exam. As for the rest of the exam, he noted with a hint of pride that he had written those questions himself. The students looked at the papers, realizing the challenge ahead. Yufei, however, remained focused on the digital disappearance of his work. He knew this wasn't just a simple technical glitch. It was a deliberate attempt to silence him. But as we have seen, Yufei isn't the type to simply give up. The classroom remained quiet as the students began to work. The tension in the air was thick. Every scratch of a pen felt like a countdown to the upcoming exam. Meanwhile, the teacher watched them with a watchful, expectant eye. Yufei glanced at the math problems, his mind moving faster than the ink on the page. To be honest, these problems were far simpler than the ones he was solving outside of class. He began to write, his movements fluid and certain. It was clear that he was in a league of his own. And yet, he kept his head down, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention. The battle for his reputation was far from over. And this exam was just another piece of the puzzle. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the lesson drew to a close. The weight of the upcoming exam lingered over every student. But for some, there were much more immediate threats to worry about. As the bell rang, the quiet tension of the classroom finally broke. And that was when the real trouble began to surface. We see Shun Xinyue approaching, her face a mask of genuine concern. She shook her head slowly, clearly worried about what was coming next. Her voice trembled as she spoke to Yufei. She apologized, explaining that she had tried to talk sense into the other girl, but it seemed her efforts had been entirely in vain. She pleaded with Yufei to just apologize, mentioning that others had been beaten for less. It was a grim warning, delivered with the kind of fear only a student knows. Yufei, however, simply found the situation somewhat amusing. He asked if she was worried about him, reminding her that she should focus on her own apology to Wenmingqi later. With those final words, he turned and walked out of the classroom with effortless confidence. Seeing that she couldn't stop him, Xinyue turned back to Wenmingqi and began to beg for help. She urged Mingqi to stop him before he reached the school gates, certain he would be ambushed. Xinyue crouched by the desk, terrified, but Mengqi simply shook her head and said she believed in him. Xinyue was nearly in tears, arguing that belief wouldn't help against the crowd Zheng Yensong had summoned. She admitted her jealousy had caused this mess, but she truly didn't want to see Yufei get hurt. Xinyue begged Mingqi to intervene, but when Mengqi hesitated before shaking her head, whispering that Yufei had actually made his own arrangements. Xinyue was both anxious and angry, clutching her head in frustration. She decided to report the matter to the teacher's office, but when Mingqi stopped her, Mengqi summoned her courage, insisting they couldn't go to the teacher. At that moment, the young heiress's gaze became uncharacteristically serious. In the past, she wouldn't have known how to handle this, but now she felt she had to believe in him. To be honest, it was a bold choice. She knew that if they involved the teachers now, all of Yufei's preparations would be wasted. Xinyue, however, thought she had gone completely mad. Xinyue warned that if things escalated, Yufei might be expelled. Mengqi took a deep breath and calmly repeated that they had to trust him. Xinyue stared at her with her mouth slightly open, unable to believe what she was hearing. It felt as though she were trapped in a dream. Meanwhile, out on the school path near the gates, several classmates were whispering as Yufei walked by. They wondered if he was truly unafraid. They reminded him that the group outside was close with Zheng Yinsong. Yufei just smiled, asking where Yinsong was. Apparently, he was hiding in the office. It seemed Yinsong was busy creating an alibi by asking teachers about homework. Lu Xiang laughed, noting that the bully was actually quite clever. Xiang suggested that Yufei should just apologize to avoid a confrontation, even offering to speak to Yinsong on his behalf. A generous offer, perhaps. Yufei didn't say a word, keeping one hand in his pocket as he walked toward the exit. Soon, the scene outside the gates came into view. Several electric bikes and motorcycles were parked by the road, where 7 or 8 thugs were loitering and smoking. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday, indeed. Xiang patted Yufei on the shoulder, wished him luck, and quickly made his exit. As soon as he left, the thugs turned their gaze toward Yufei. The group shared a knowing smirk. Then, one of them with dyed yellow hair stepped forward, singling Yufei out from the crowd. He called Yufei over, causing the other students to scatter in fear. No one wanted to be anywhere near the impending trouble. The yellow-haired youth blew out a cloud of smoke and draped an arm over Yufei's shoulder, asking if he was the new transfer student. Yufei raised an eyebrow, realizing these were just dropouts from a local vocational school. They weren't much older than he was, despite their posturing. Seeing them blocking the gate with their cheap bikes, Yufei couldn't help but chuckle. He asked if Zheng Yinsong was the one who sent them. The yellow-haired boy just grinned and told him they needed to have a little chat. For any normal student, this would have been a nightmare. For any ordinary student, this would be terrifying, especially with the dyed hair, the tattoos, and the cigarette smoke. 2 of them even held iron pipes. It was certainly meant to be intimidating, but to someone who had lived a whole life and returned, it was just comical. Yufei simply asked if this was all of them. He admitted he expected a larger crowd. The yellow-haired youth laughed mockingly and called out to a friend named Dazhuang, joking about how the kid thought they were too few. The other thug sneered, asking Yufei who he thought he was to be acting so tough. But just as the words left their mouths, Sun Fei's cousin appeared near the station. The cousin muttered to his group, confirming the location, and suddenly a massive wave of older, tougher-looking men began marching toward the school gates. We see this formidable crowd surround Yufei and the small-time thugs, frightening the nearby students and the parents who had come to pick up their children. The parents instinctively shielded their kids, while even the school security guard stood frozen in shock, his hands trembling as he reached for his phone to call the administration. Suddenly, the thugs Zheng Yinsong had hired looked completely stunned. One of the newcomers, a man called Brother Lu, looked around and asked if these kids were the only ones. He wondered aloud if they really needed such a large group for a few school dropouts. It seemed like a lot of grandstanding for such a small, pathetic situation. Brother Lu recognized Yufei from a photo and laughed, asking if these few troublemakers were the problem. Yufei, having seen the cousin's photo earlier, nodded in greeting. Yufei admitted he hadn't expected so few either, as he'd prepared for 20. He explained that the mastermind was currently hiding in a teacher's office to create an alibi. He told Brother Lu to handle it as he saw fit, noting that since both sides were outsiders, they could just say they were passing by. Brother Lu smiled warmly at the suggestion. He told Yufei to head home and immediately had his men surround the young thugs. He asked who sent them, telling them to move along and stop blocking the gate. The dozens of men then escorted the small group of thugs to a quiet corner for a little educational chat. Meanwhile, back at the school, things were finally moving. The dean of students, Lu Xiaoping, came rushing to the gates only to find the area completely deserted. He looked around, confused by the sudden silence. He asked what had happened to the fight that was reported. The security guard swallowed hard, explaining that a student had indeed been cornered just moments ago. The guard described how a much larger group had suddenly appeared and dragged the original thugs away toward the left. It all happened so fast, it felt like a blur. Dean Lu took a sharp breath and asked if any of their students had been hurt. The guard shook his head, saying he didn't believe anyone was injured. He noted that the student involved seemed to have walked away calmly. Hearing this, Dean Lu finally let out a sigh of relief, though he remained cautious. He immediately sent a message to the faculty group chat, warning all teachers that outsiders were loitering and fighting near the gates, and to check on their students. He urged everyone to check if any students had been hurt and to notify him immediately, prompting every homeroom teacher at number 2 high school to take action. They began messaging their students privately to assess the situation, and by the time evening self-study rolled around, class 3 to 4 was absolutely buzzing with excitement. Someone had hidden near the gate and captured photos of Yufei being confronted by the thugs, followed by the massive crowd that suddenly appeared to back him up. The small-time punks had been utterly terrified, and honestly, who could blame them? Everyone assumed Yufei was finished, but it turned out he was the real boss. We see the students discussing how he had summoned dozens of grown men, and suddenly, their respect for him reached an entirely new level. They all knew Zheng Yinsong was tough. After all, he'd started fights at the gate before, but no one expected the top student from number 1 high to be even more formidable. Shen Xinyue let out a quiet sigh and tossed a note over to Zheng Yinsong. After reading it, he was so consumed by rage that he slammed his books down. That very evening, Zheng Yinsong was summoned to the teacher's office to stand in punishment and write a self-reflection, his plan having backfired completely. Meanwhile, back in the study hall, a student suddenly shouted for everyone to look. The famous novel by that dropout from number 1 high had been posted to their forum. The author's ID was familiar, claiming he had transferred to number 2 high and would continue the story there, which sent a wave of excitement through the girls in class. Jiang Shiqi widened her eyes in disbelief and turned to Wen Mingqi, whispering a question about whether the author really was the new transfer student. She glanced instinctively at the empty seat beside Wen Mingqi, expecting her friend to be just as shocked by the revelation as everyone else was. To her surprise, Wen Mingqi simply nodded. Jiang Shiqi couldn't help but blurt out, "It really is Lin Yufei." And just like that, the classroom erupted. Everyone turned their heads at once, the air thick with speculation. They wondered if Yufei truly wrote it, or if it was just a classmate of his as rumored. But as Shun Xinhua pointed out with a smile, he was the only transfer from number 1 high, so it almost certainly had to be him. Shun Xinhua and Wen Mingqi locked eyes, sharing a silent moment of realization, when suddenly, Su Jing hurried over to Xinhua's side, looking panicked. She whispered, asking if they should apologize, fearing that since even Zheng Yinsong failed, Yufei might send his men after them next. Xinhua sighed and told her he wouldn't do that, but suggested she write a formal apology anyway. Su Jing nodded frantically, desperate to make amends. She immediately tore a page from her notebook and began scribbling. After the first period of self-study ended, she nervously approached Wen Mingqi. Stuttering through her words, she apologized for what she had said earlier and handed over the letter, while Shun Xinhua watched on with a complicated expression. Shun Xinhua spoke with total sincerity, admitting she was sorry too, but she had already made a firm decision. Su Jing froze, and even Wen Mingqi looked up in shock. Xinhua summoned her courage and smiled, suggesting they compete fairly to see who could win Lin Yufei's heart. Beside them, Jiang Shiqi's jaw dropped in pure disbelief. Wen Mingqi was equally stunned. She had never truly imagined a boy like Yufei would like her. Suddenly, she felt a wave of dizziness, as if she were spinning through space. The following day, we see Yufei return to school, and he has already become a legendary figure. Students along the path whispered incessantly while stealing glances at him. Yet, despite the fame, no one dared to greet him. When he arrived at the school cafeteria, he happened to run into his classmate, Lu Ziang. Ziang swallowed hard in embarrassment, stammering an apology and claiming he wasn't actually that close with Zheng Yinsong. To be honest, he looked terrified. He insisted he had tried to talk Yinsong out of it, but failed. Ziang had heard the rumors. The thugs Yinsong hired hadn't just failed to teach Yufei a lesson. They had been the ones who ended up getting schooled instead. It was quite the reversal of fortune. Yufei thought to himself that this guy was quite the character, wondering what kind of strange logic he followed. He didn't bother responding and headed back to class. The moment he entered, his classmates swarmed him. With a smile, he finally came clean and admitted that yes, he was indeed the author of the famous novel. He laughed it off and returned to his seat, only to find a surprise waiting for him, a portion of fried rice noodles and a bottle of fresh milk. He tapped Jiang Shiqi on the shoulder to ask who had left them there. Shiqi glanced at the English class representative's empty seat and guessed it was a gift from her. Just then, Wen Mingqi returned to the classroom carrying her own breakfast and a few textbooks. It was a perfectly ordinary morning, or so it seemed. As she sat down, Yufei handed her the noodles and milk he had found, then swapped them for the breakfast she had just bought, suggesting they trade meals. Mingqi frowned, asking why they should switch. Yufei explained with a straight face that he wanted hers because it smelled much better, which, naturally, made little sense. She paused, confused as to why her breakfast would be any different, but she simply shrugged it off. Since they were both fried noodles, she didn't really mind. He told her not to let the milk go to waste, and personally held it up for her to take a sip. She gave him a very strange look, her mind racing for an explanation. Suddenly, she had a realization. She wondered if he was trying to avoid paying her back. After some thought, she concluded her seatmate was trying to seize all her assets. Why else would he ignore all social norms so early in the morning? Yufei couldn't help but chuckle, telling her that his intentions were far simpler than that. Yufei asked her if he really looked like that kind of person. He admitted he wasn't a saint, but he would never dream of swindling her. He promised to pay her back, just not right now. Wen Mingqi looked quite distressed, explaining that the money was all her savings and this month's living expenses. Yufei then suggested that he would take care of all her needs for a while. He offered to cover everything and pay her back with interest later. Mingqi knit her brows and whispered, wondering if he was being serious. To be honest, she wasn't entirely convinced. He told her he'd even wash her dishes, then suggested setting up a family sharing card on her phone with a 3,000 yuan monthly limit. Mingqi, however, was quick to protest. She shook her head, insisting it was far too much and that 600 would suffice. Yufei rolled his eyes, declaring that she had to spend at least 1,000 or she'd fail his test. He told her that a girl should learn how to treat herself, as she was far too frugal. Without waiting for an answer, he added her on the messaging app to set up the shared card. He finalized the 1,000 yuan limit while Mingqi just stood there, letting out a dazed little sound of agreement. Deep down, Yufei found this little wealthy lady's reaction quite hilarious. A little later, their teacher, Liang Yuding, called both Yufei and Zheng Yinsong out of the classroom. Naturally, the rest of the students couldn't resist stealing glances as they left. Out in the hallway, teacher Liang stood with a stern expression, asking if they knew why they were there. Yufei just smiled and insisted that no fighting had actually taken place. He claimed he was just at his cousin's birthday and told the teacher to ask his best buddy, Yinsong, for confirmation. He even joked that they were far too close to ever fight. Yinsong was completely stunned, looking like he had lost the ability to speak. Teacher Liang glanced at him skeptically and asked for his side of the story. Yinsong's mouth hung open for a long time before he finally managed to squeeze out a single word of agreement. Teacher Liang was nearly speechless at their sudden, suspicious friendship. She sarcastically asked if they wanted to be seated together since they were such best buddies. At that, both boys shouted no, in perfect, terrified unison. She crossed her arms, wondering why such close friends wouldn't want to sit together. Yufei quickly explained that they were simply worried it would interfere with their studies. Teacher Liang looked Yufei over and noted that he certainly didn't look like he'd been in a scrap. As for Yinsong, the situation was even more peculiar. The boy had apparently spent the previous afternoon hiding in the math teacher's office, obsessively finishing a practice exam. It seemed no physical harm had come to either of them. She decided not to notify their parents for the time being. However, she warned both Yufei and Yinsong that if she heard even a whisper of a conflict between them again, or if they involved people from outside the school, they would be sent straight to the dean's office. It was a clear warning, and they both understood the stakes perfectly. Yufei smiled and agreed, then casually mentioned he wanted to join the English-speaking competition she had discussed. Teacher Liang took a deep breath to steady herself. She waved Yinsong back to class for morning study, but kept Yufei behind. Once they were alone, she looked at him closely and asked what he was really up to. She asked if Yinsong had been targeting him in class or forcing him to stay silent. In response, Yufei began to recount the events at the school gate with the precision of a professional. As he reported the details to Teacher Liang, she was left completely stunned by his explanation. So much for them being best buddies, it seemed. Before heading back to the classroom, Yufei didn't forget to coach his teacher on how to report the incident to the school leaders. He suggested she tell them those people were just there for his cousin's birthday. Teacher Liang couldn't help but be amused by his audacity. Seizing the moment, Yufei casually remarked that she looked truly beautiful when she smiled. To be honest, he was pushing his luck. Teacher Liang, unable to handle the boy's silver tongue, playfully shooed him away with a light kick. She laughed and told him to get back to his morning studies already. It seemed his sugar-coated charm had worked, as she decided not to pursue the matter further. A little later, we see Teacher Liang standing at the front of the class. She announced that the four-school joint exam would be held tomorrow, and she'd distribute the permits that afternoon. Then, she moved on to the English-speaking competition. Since only 3 people had signed up, there was no need for a selection process. The participants were Lin Yufei, Shun Xingyue, and Jiang Shiqi. She told the 3 of them to start preparing. She also mentioned that each class needed at least 2 acts for the New Year's gala, so volunteers should register with the arts representative. Meanwhile, the classroom at number 1 high school was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread that the novel previously updated on their forum was now appearing on number 2 high's site. Rumor had it that a transfer student was the author. After asking around, the students realized there was only one senior who had recently transferred schools. They wondered if Lin Yufei could really be the one writing it. Suddenly, the chatter died down instantly. Vice Principal Guo Haiba was standing right at the back door. Having overheard their conversation, he frowned and asked who had moved that number 1 high novel over to number 2 high. The students were caught completely off guard. They all exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say. Vice Principal Guo, looking quite stern, demanded to know where the class monitor was. At that, Chen Jijia stood up. Jijia gave a bitter smile, admitting he had no idea who the author was. Vice Principal Guo looked at him with genuine surprise, finding his answer hard to believe. He countered by saying he'd been told a student from this very class was the writer. This revelation caused the room to erupt in a frenzy of whispers. Could it really be Yufei? Monitor Jijia scratched his head and noted that since the novel was being updated at number 2 high by a transfer student, it certainly pointed toward Lin Yufei. Vice Principal Guo paused, confused. He mentioned that the homeroom teacher had claimed the author stopped writing to focus on the college entrance exams, which, naturally, didn't add up. The students all shook their heads in disagreement. Just then, a student named Sun Fei suddenly stood up and confirmed that Lin Yufei was indeed the author. He explained that back when the Education Bureau leaders were praising the novel, he had personally asked Yufei about it, and that, as they say, was the smoking gun. Sun Fei added that after he asked, the homeroom teacher told them to drop it, and the matter was forgotten. Hearing this, Vice Principal Guo Haiba's expression darkened instantly. With a stern face, he told the students to continue their morning studies and walked out. The moment his footsteps faded, the classroom of Senior Class 2 erupted into a frenzy. A crowd swarmed Sun Fei, buzzing with the realization that Lin Yufei really was the author. Meanwhile, we find the homeroom teacher, Song Wenba, organizing papers in his office. Suddenly, Vice Principal Guo walked in, causing every teacher in the room to look up in surprise. It's safe to say the atmosphere shifted the moment he crossed the threshold. Standing at the door in a foul mood, Hua called for the Class 2 teacher to step outside. The two of them moved to the hallway for a private and likely tense conversation. What? You're saying that novel is being updated on the number 2 high forum? Song Wenba stammered, his entire body trembling as the news hit him like a physical blow. He broke into a cold sweat. He had assumed that banning the account would end the updates, but he never imagined the boy would simply move to a rival school's site. Vice Principal Gua glared at him, asking why he had claimed the parents stopped the writing for the sake of grades. Why is your class saying the dropout wrote it? Song Wenba could only offer a forced, awkward smile, struggling to find his words. To be honest, he was caught in a web of his own making. Hua couldn't contain his frustration any longer. He snapped at Song Wenba, telling him he knew exactly what he was doing by hiding the truth. He accused him of being too afraid to admit the author was the student who dropped out after their argument. What are you so scared of? So what if he wrote it? He pointed out that simply being honest from the start would have solved everything. But now, the situation had become far more complicated than it needed to be. In a few days, leaders from the Education Bureau would be visiting number 2 high. We learned that this is a critical time for all the top local schools. Number 1 high, number 2 high, and the others were all competing for the provincial model school status. They couldn't afford to leave the leaders with a bad impression. He ordered Song to find a way to make the student take the novel down or convince him to return to the number 1 high forum. Song Wenba stood there, completely stunned. Vice Principal Guo reminded him that he was up for a senior teacher promotion this year. If this incident made the school a laughingstock, the consequences would be severe. He urged him to handle it quickly while the news was still contained. He had to act now, before the story spread beyond their control. The choice was simple: either get the updates back on their forum or stop them entirely. Otherwise, it would be a humiliation, far worse than claiming an outsider wrote it. Song Wenba gritted his teeth and apologized to the vice principal, promising he wouldn't let the school lose face on his watch. He sounded determined, if a bit desperate. Satisfied for now, Vice Principal Gua nodded and walked away with his hands behind his back. Not long after, we move into the third period of the day. Our homeroom teacher, Song Wenba, stood before the class and cleared his throat, asking if anyone there was still on good terms with Lin Yufei. The students exchanged confused glances until Sun Fei finally raised his hand with a grin, claiming he was doing all right. Then, someone whispered Chun Sairu's name. Song Wenba's eyes lit up instantly as he turned to her, noting that since she and Lin Yufei were close, she was the perfect person to help. He asked her to find out why the novel was no longer being updated at number 1 high, and to convince him to bring it back instead of posting at number 2 high. Chun Sairu hesitated, pointing out that since he was now a student at number 2 high, it seemed perfectly normal for him to post there. She didn't see why he'd return. With a strained smile, Song Wenba simply told her to try her best to persuade him. He really wanted her to convince him. Later, we see a message sent to Lin Yufei about the teacher's request. He replied with a playful smirk, noting that he had already deleted her contact info. It's no wonder Chun Sairu was acting so hesitant. She was likely too embarrassed to admit she'd been blocked. To be honest, the irony was quite delicious. Sure enough, a friend request from Chun Sairu popped up a moment later. Without a second thought, he hit the decline button immediately. He even turned around to tease his wealthy desk mate, Wen Mingqi, reminding her not to forget their movie date this Saturday. Wen Mingqi looked quite piteous as she explained she was out of money, which made him burst into a fit of silent laughter. She seemed to be struggling to process the logic. 10 minutes into the lesson, the little heiress suddenly started muttering to herself that something wasn't right. She realized that using a family sharing card didn't count as her spending money unless she bought the ticket separately. He buried his face in his arms, laughing. He found her confusion absolutely adorable, but his laughter didn't go unnoticed. The chemistry teacher finally called him out by name from the podium. Remembering he was actually in the middle of a class, he stood up quickly and told the teacher he had simply recalled something very happy. Meanwhile, when Mengqi's face turned bright red, knowing the joke was at her expense, she buried her head as deep as it would go. The teacher advised him to focus on the lesson and save the extracurricular thoughts for later. Finally, the lunch bell rang, signaling the end of class. Shen Xinyue rushed over to his desk immediately, asking if he had really rejected Chun Sairu's friend request. He realized then that Chen had gone to her for help. Shen Xinyue laughed at how heartless he was being, mentioning that Chun had something important to discuss, but his response remained cold and indifferent. He told her there was no need and turned to his desk mate, suggesting they go grab lunch. Our little heiress, Wen Mingqi, let out a soft huff before following closely behind him. Shen Xinyue stood there completely stunned, as this was the first time she had ever been so blatantly ignored. Nearby, Su Jiang walked over with a smirk, telling her to stop staring. He suggested that perhaps Lin Yufei simply preferred that type of girl. Meanwhile, standing in the cafeteria line, he was busy deciding what to eat when he noticed Wen Mengqi's expression. Her big eyes were watery and fixed on him. Between amusement and confusion, he asked Jiang Shiqi if someone had been bullying the girl while he wasn't looking. He wondered why she was suddenly acting this way, but Jiang Shiqi just shook her head. Finally, when Mengqi leaned in and asked in a guilty whisper if that girl from number 1 high was very pretty. He let out a sudden laugh, teasingly asking if she was jealous. When Mengqi bit her lip and remained silent, though her eyes were filled with a certain sense of grievance as she stared at him. The three of them eventually found a quiet corner to eat and chat. During the meal, he asked if they were planning to sign up for the upcoming arts festival, which piqued Wenmengqi's curiosity. He went silent for a few seconds before smiling, noting that he could either sign up or skip it. Suddenly, Jiang Shiqi leaned in to share a little secret with him. She revealed that Wenmengqi had actually won first prize at the arts festival last year. He looked on with genuine surprise, while Wenmengqi shyly shook her head and tried to stop her friend. Jiang Shiqi laughed, telling her there was nothing to be afraid of since this was her greatest strength. She then proceeded to spill the secret that Wenmengqi was actually a piano prodigy. After finishing lunch and discussing the performance a bit more, he smiled and decided he would volunteer to sign up. Meanwhile, we find Shin Sairu entering the teacher's office. She apologized to the teacher, explaining that Lin Yufei had hurt her feelings and was now ignoring her. She suggested that perhaps the teacher should just call him directly. Song Wenbo was left speechless, arguing that as classmates, she should be much easier to talk to. He reminded her that they used to be on such excellent terms. Shin Sairu's face flushed as she whispered that those days were in the past. Song Wenbo, however, continued his earnest persuasion, trying to convince her to try one more time. He claimed that boys are easily swayed and suggested she just say a few kind words to him. He even offered to pay if she would just take him out for a meal to settle things. She asked why he didn't just call Lin Yufei himself if he wanted it done so badly. Song Wenbo froze instantly, his mouth hanging open as he struggled to find a response. Shin Sairu suddenly found the courage to ask if he was simply afraid of losing face. The homeroom teacher's expression darkened immediately at the suggestion. He snapped at her for talking nonsense and told her she could go back to class. Shin Sairu didn't hesitate for a second, quickly agreeing and making her exit. However, the moment the student left the office, Song Wenbo was hit with a wave of instant regret. He smacked his forehead in frustration, realizing he was back at square one. Gritting his teeth, he finally pulled up the student directory on his computer. He stared at the string of digits for the phone number, but he just couldn't bring himself to press dial. After hesitating for a long time, Song Wenbo finally called in Lin Yufei's former desk mate, Sun Fei. As the student stood stiffly in the office, the homeroom teacher forced a bright, awkward smile. He reminded Sun Fei that since they were desk mates, they must have a good relationship. He then asked if Sun Fei could talk to Lin Yufei about moving his novel off the number 2 high forum. He suggested that perhaps the boy could return to the number 1 high forum to post updates, or better yet, wait until after the college entrance exams. Song Wenbo was truly being quite thick-skinned about it. With a fake smile, he claimed he was simply worried about the boy's academic performance. Sun Fei, playing dumb, asked why the teacher was still so concerned about the grades of a student who had already transferred. He pointed out that moving the novel back to the number 1 high forum would be just as distracting for his studies. Song Wenbo cleared his throat awkwardly and continued to maintain his forced grin. He insisted it was completely different and asked if Sun Fei would just help him communicate with Lin Yufei. Sun Fei pursed his lips and admitted that while he could do it, there was a slight problem. Song Wenbo's eyes lit up instantly as he urged the boy to speak his mind. Sun Fei scratched his head with a deliberate look of embarrassment, explaining that he actually owed Lin Yufei some money. He claimed he felt too ashamed to reach out to him while the debt remained. Song Wenbo waved it off dismissively, asking exactly how much he owed and offering to pay it off for him. Sun Fei asked in disbelief if he was serious. Song Wenbo considered the situation. This wasn't just about the school's reputation anymore. It involved his own professional certification and status. He smiled generously, declaring it was the least he could do since he was asking for a favor. To be honest, he was becoming quite desperate. He then asked for the specific amount of the debt. Sun Fei lowered his head and rubbed his nose to hide a smirk, casually mentioning that it wasn't much, just about 400 yuan. Song Wenbo bit the bullet and agreed to cover the 400, provided Sun Fei told Lin Yufei that it would be best, and he emphasized best, to stop writing until after the exams. He argued that even though the boy had transferred, as a teacher, he still worried about him wasting his potential. It was a noble-sounding excuse for a very selfish request. He claimed this was a critical stage in the boy's life. Sun Fei, holding back his laughter, said he would try his best but couldn't guarantee that Lin Yufei would actually listen. Sun Fei suggested they just forget it and said he'd wait until he had his own money to pay the debt. Song Wenbo, however, immediately pulled out his phone with a grand, heroic flourish. He told Sun Fei to bring up his QR code, promising that as long as he put his heart into persuading the boy, he would never have to pay the teacher back. He insisted that the novel was simply too damaging to the boy's future. Sun Fei grinned and made a half-hearted attempt to decline, but Song Wenbo was already committed. The teacher insisted he was a man of his word and actually transferred the 400 yuan right then and there. Sun Fei thanked him and prepared to head back to class. He promised to update the teacher as soon as Lin Yufei replied. But the moment Sun Fei stepped out of the office, he immediately sent a message to his old friend. He was laughing hysterically, telling Lin Yufei that he had just made a fortune. He explained that Song Wenbo had paid him 400 yuan just to convince him to stop writing. It seemed the homeroom teacher, Song Wenbo, was truly getting desperate. Lin Yufei couldn't help but smirk, muttering that he really ought to update a new chapter tonight just to celebrate. That evening, while everyone else was buried in books preparing for the four-school joint exam, we find Lin Yufei researching how to register an online shop. He remembered that in a few years, e-commerce would explode in a massive wave. Starting now might not be the very first bite of the apple, but it was certainly close enough. At the very least, he wanted to enter the market before the online shopping craze completely overwhelmed the physical economy. As for his product selection, he wasn't looking for a long-term brand. His goal was simply to make a quick fortune in the short term. To achieve this, he chose a very niche and often overlooked industry, selling specialty cosplay lingerie. Of course, since he was still a student, he knew he had to keep a low profile. Fortunately, having just turned 18 last month, he finally met the legal age requirement to open a shop. Suddenly, a message from Sun Fei popped up on his screen, shouting in disbelief, asking Lin Yufei if his account had been hacked. Lin Yufei laughed and replied that he was actually planning to open a shop to sell these items. Sun Fei insisted he must be hacked because in his mind, Lin Yufei was the ultimate straight man. As a dedicated science student, there was simply no world where Sun Fei could imagine his friend sending him pictures of such provocative clothing. The most absurd part was that Lin Yufei actually claimed he was going to sell them. Since he didn't have many close friends he could trust, he decided to send the photos to Sun Fei anyway. He figured Sun Fei could at least help him pick out which styles might be popular with customers. The next morning, we see the students gathered for the big exam, the atmosphere thick with nervous energy. Suddenly, Lu Ziang turned to him with a grin, asking how his Chinese skills were. Lin Yufei replied casually that if all went well, he should be at the top of the grade. Lu Ziang gave him a thumbs up, impressed by the confidence. However, just as the words left his mouth, a familiar and cold voice rang out from the doorway. The voice warned him that as long as he didn't get caught cheating, he could claim whatever rank he wanted. Lin Yufei looked up and froze. The proctor was none other than Lu Chong. He suddenly remembered that for the joint exams, teachers from the four schools were swapped to prevent bias. It was a bit of bad luck, to be honest. Lu Chong barked at the students to put away all their books and review materials, threatening to confiscate the papers of anyone caught with cheat sheets. He noted that while he didn't know the rules at number 2 high, at his school, cheating meant a call to the parents. He didn't forget to shoot Lin Yufei a pointed, lingering look. Once the papers were distributed, Lin Yufei immediately began writing. Over an hour flew by in a blur, and then, with a calm smile, he raised his hand to ask if he could leave early. He glanced at the classroom clock and saw there were still 45 minutes left. In his mind, there was simply no reason to keep wasting time sitting there. The proctor, Lu Chong, gave a cold smile and noted that it was still early, reminding everyone that leaving wasn't allowed until 30 minutes before the end. Ultimately, Lin Yufei waited until that exact 30-minute mark to hand in his paper and leave. Lu Chong collected it, but then pulled him aside for a private chat. Frowning, Lu Chong asked if he was the one writing that novel on the school forum, remarking that he'd never heard of Lin Yufei having such a talent before. He wondered why this skill hadn't surfaced sooner. Lin Yufei simply smiled and suggested that since the Education Bureau leaders praised him, Lu Chong should mention he's now at number 2 high. Lu Chong's face darkened instantly. He snapped that a little praise had clearly gone to the boy's head, insisting that the college entrance exam required real study, not distractions. He grumbled that messing around with such nonsense was a complete waste of time. Lin Yufei, ever calm, simply nodded and agreed with everything the director said. He politely excused himself, mentioning he should probably head back to write a few more chapters, as those Education Bureau leaders might be waiting for an update. Lu Chong was absolutely livid. The boy certainly knew how to poke a sore spot. As soon as Lin Yufei left, the director pulled out his phone to message Song Wenba. He told the homeroom teacher he was being driven mad by this student, who seemed to think he was special just for writing a stinking novel, and demanded it be handled. Song Wenba replied that since the boy refused to delete the story, he had come up with a different plan. He intended to take a new suggestion to the principal to address the situation from a different angle. And we have to admit, number 1 high moved incredibly fast. By the time the Chinese exam ended, the teachers had already sent out a new notice to every class. The school was launching an official novel writing competition, offering gold, silver, and bronze awards for the best submissions. To be honest, it was a clever pivot. The principal would personally award the medals, and winning works would even be archived in the school library. Since it included all 3 grades, there was a massive response from the students. Suddenly, the school forum was flooded with creative energy as dozens of students began writing their own stories. While eating lunch, Jiang Shiqi paused when she heard about the literary competition, her eyes instinctively drifting toward Lin Yufei, who was sitting next to Wen Mingqi. Lin Yufei laughed, finding the whole situation quite amusing. As the group began discussing the exams, he offered them a little piece of advice. He suggested they prepare an essay regarding environmental governance, as he felt it was highly likely to appear on the test given its recent prominence in the news. Jiang Shiqi couldn't help but praise him, calling him impressive and wondering if all the top students at number 1 high could predict the exam questions like that. Wen Mingqi smiled while checking her phone, jokingly adding that Lin Yufei's predictions were usually far more accurate than most. He teased that he couldn't speak for others, but reminded Wenmengqi not to stand him up for their movie date tomorrow, as the science and English exams were still ahead. As the final bells rang for the afternoon sessions, the proctors began collecting the papers. Everyone stood up to stretch their weary limbs, and who could blame them, really? Sitting for a whole day is exhausting work. Back in the classroom, Jiang Shiqi looked at Lin Yufei with the kind of excitement usually reserved for a pop idol. The girls nearby cheered as he returned, amazed that the English essay topic was indeed about environmental protection. His prediction had been spot on, much to their delight. Lin Yufei simply chuckled, attributing it all to good luck. Just then, Wenmengqi returned to the room, happily telling Jiang Shiqi how easy the essay had felt. At that moment, their homeroom teacher, Liang Yuding, stepped onto the podium with a smile, announcing that she wouldn't be handing out extra English homework this weekend. She then shared some news, asking if they'd heard about the other school's literary competition. To be honest, the news of number 1 High's pivot had traveled fast. Several students instinctively glanced back at Lin Yufei in the rear row. Their teacher explained that their school wouldn't be doing a writing contest like the others. Instead, with only 100 days left until the college entrance exams, the school was organizing study groups consisting of 4 students each. The plan was to group students with different strengths so they could help one another, with each person teaching the subjects they mastered best. However, right then, Lin Yufei raised his hand. He politely suggested that while many schools use this 4-person model, the results are often quite disappointing. He proposed a different angle. Instead of fixed 4-person groups, they should implement a more flexible system of student-led lectures. This way, students could attend the sessions they actually needed, allowing everyone to play to their strengths and share their expertise more effectively. By teaching others, they would solidify their own knowledge, while those with weaknesses could choose the best student teacher for them rather than being limited to one group. The suggestion was met with immediate nods of approval. It was a sharp, insightful idea, exactly what one would expect from a top student like him. Friday ended in a chorus of laughter and cheers, as the arrival of the weekend put everyone in high spirits. But what happened next actually surprised him. It turned out that Wenmengqi, despite her family's hidden wealth, took the bus home. No one at school suspected just how rich her family actually was. In the blink of an eye, Saturday arrived. He had arranged to meet Wenmengqi at Wanda Plaza at 2 in the afternoon for their long-awaited date. He had prepared thoroughly, bringing 2 cups of milk tea and a delicate bracelet as a gift. A little later, he spotted a familiar figure approaching from a distance. It was Wenmengqi, looking radiant in a white dress and carrying a small white bag, looking every bit the elegant young lady she was. Carrying a small bag and standing about 5'4" in modest heels, she looked remarkably elegant, even though she wasn't wearing a bit of makeup. She hadn't learned how to use cosmetics yet and still wore her glasses, but it was already clear she was a natural beauty in the making. This was the first time he had seen Wenmengqi out of her school uniform, and the shy heiress nervously fidgeted with her fingers, asking if she looked all right. He couldn't help but chuckle, assuring her she looked lovely before offering her the milk tea and the gift he had prepared for her. When she hesitated, he gently pressed the box into her hands, suggesting she open it and see if she liked it, as they could always exchange it later. As she carefully opened the box, she seemed to freeze in place, allowing him to smoothly offer to help her put the bracelet on. Before she could even process what was happening, she realized the delicate chain was already fastened around her wrist. We see them arrive at the 4th floor of the mall, which was quite crowded for a Saturday, where he told her to wait while he fetched the tickets. He asked if she wanted popcorn, though to be honest, the question was unnecessary, when Wenmengqi was already staring longingly at a child's snack nearby. But just then, a familiar voice called out his name as Sun Fei excitedly asked what Lin Yufei was doing there. Turning around, he found Sun Fei and 2 other classmates from number 1 High standing right behind them in the queue. After a brief chat, he returned to Wenmengqi with the popcorn and orange juice, mentioning he had just run into some old school friends. Upon hearing this, Wenmengqi was struck by a wave of shyness, burying her head as if trying to hide from the entire world. Her adorable reaction was almost too much for him to handle without laughing, as her natural charm shone through even without makeup. She was only unpopular at school because of her reserved personality, but that didn't stop Sun Fei and the others from starting a commotion. Wang Songtao even managed to sneak a photo and post it to their class group chat, which immediately erupted with activity. The messages came flying in, with some calling Lin Yufei a player and questioning his feelings for Chinsairu. The gossip spread like wildfire as they wondered where the photo had been taken and who the mysterious girl could be. One student remarked that the girl in the photo was someone people usually mocked, expressing utter disbelief that Lin Yufei would choose her. Soon, Shun Xinyue began talking incessantly to the group, fueling the fire with more rumors about Lin Yufei and Wenmengqi. While Shun Xinyue was busy telling Chinsairu everything, we find Lin Yufei and the little heiress, Wenmengqi, sitting in a quiet corner of the cinema. Leaning in close to her ear, he softly asked if this was her first time going to the movies with a boy, and she gave a slow, dazed nod. She went back to munching on her popcorn, remarking on how delicious it was, which made him chuckle at her adorable, spacey nature. He teased her, asking why no one had ever invited her out before, then followed up by asking if she needed to go home for dinner that night. Wen Mingqi suddenly looked startled, crossing her arms over her chest in a defensive gesture while staring at him with wide, wary eyes. He nearly burst out laughing, clarifying that he was only asking if they should eat out first or if she was expected home, not if she was staying the night. Realizing she had completely misunderstood his intentions, her ears turned a deep shade of red as she let out a tiny, embarrassed sound. He found her reaction incredibly charming. At the very least, it was good to know she knew how to protect herself from being easily deceived. By the time the movie ended, it was already 5:30, and after seeing her off, he sent a message to Sun Fei to meet for dinner nearby. He explained he needed a favor, asking if Sun Fei's cousin was still working as a manager at the internet cafe, which caught Sun Fei off guard. Sun Fei wondered if he had offended someone again, but Lin Yufei laughed and explained he just needed people to help boost his online store's sales. He laid out the plan and the commission structure clearly, and before they knew it, the weekend was already drawing to a close. Sun Fei moved quickly, gathering over 30 people to help, leaving Lin Yufei busy and dazed from working straight through the afternoon. Just as he was about to rest, he noticed the class group chat was exploding after their teacher, Liang Yuding, posted a somber message. It turned out their classmate Zheng Yensong was facing a crisis. His grandmother was hospitalized, and his father had been in a car accident. The teacher hoped everyone could lend a helping hand, mentioning she would be visiting the hospital with the class president the following week. Lin Yufei paused, a sudden spark of inspiration hitting him as he realized that giving someone a fish is never as good as teaching them to fish. He figured a small donation wouldn't solve much, so he got Zheng Yensong's number from the teacher to offer him a way to earn the money instead. After explaining the business opportunity, Zheng Yensong was completely won over, immediately agreeing to join him in the venture. The next morning was spent reviewing exam papers, but after lunch, Lin Yufei felt a sudden, unexpected tap on his shoulder. Looking up, we see the Chinese teacher, Luo Wenxuan, standing at the classroom door with a bright smile, announcing that the joint exam results are finally out. He tells Lin Yufei that he did quite well. Out of only 2 perfect score essays in the entire school, 1 belongs to him, and he ranked 4th overall in Chinese. Lin Yufei's eyes light up, though he can't help but wonder about his boastful promise to take first place so the teachers would leave him alone. Luo Wenxuan gives him a knowing, half-smile and tells him he'll see the full results soon enough, before asking if his novel is truly original work. After Lin Yufei nods in confirmation, the teacher explains he's only checking because officials from the Education Bureau are arriving tomorrow for an inspection. It seems the first high school started a literary competition, and while their school lacks one, they plan to establish a literature club for the second-year students. The principal's idea is to have Lin Yufei participate in an open class as a student representative and a role model for reading and writing. He's expected to share his writing experiences and how he started this journey, especially since those high-ranking officials might be sitting in to listen. The teacher suggests he organize his plot and prepare some excerpts to make his speech more persuasive, a perfectly reasonable request, all things considered. When he returns to the classroom, Jiang Shiqi looks up curiously to ask what the teacher wanted, and Lin Yufei just gives a modest smile. He tells her it was nothing major, just that he ranked 4th in the grade for Chinese, which immediately causes his classmates to swarm around him in excitement. He mentions the perfect score essay, earning him looks of pure envy from everyone. Meanwhile, a classmate brings up the literary competition at the other school. The student laughs, mentioning that the first high school set up a popularity poll for the competition, and the current first-place winner is a bit of a shock. Guo Yanze can't stop laughing as he explains that the top spot actually belongs to Lin Yufei, or more accurately, his novel has the highest vote count. His lead is so massive that the votes for 2nd through 10th place combined don't even touch his total. It is, to put it mildly, a complete landslide. At the same time, we find the vice principal of the first high school, Hua Haiba, fuming in his office as he shouts into the phone at Song Wenba. He demands to know why one person's score is higher than everyone else's combined, calling the entire situation utterly ridiculous and absurd. The class monitor, Song Wenba, takes a look at the online rankings and is left speechless. The gap between 1st and 2nd place is indeed staggering. Nervously, Song Wenba tries to explain that the leaderboard must be inaccurate, arguing that since Lin Yufei dropped out, he shouldn't even be eligible to compete. He insists the results have no reference value, but Vice Principal Hua Haiba only responds with a sharp, mocking laugh at the sheer mess of it all. Vice Principal Hua snaps at Song Wenba, asking if he's truly that dense. The logic doesn't matter, only the fact that the current rankings look absolutely ridiculous. He demands a novel that can actually rival Lin Yufei's work immediately to knock him off the top spot, leaving Song Wenba to take a very deep breath. Suddenly struck by a desperate idea, Song Wenba suggests they have a teacher ghostwrite a piece to reclaim the first-place position for their school. Hua Haiba hesitates for a moment before questioning the ethics of having a faculty member compete against children, a fair point, one might say. Song Wenba points out that Teacher Liu has published books before and would be perfect, but the vice principal shakes his head at the blatant cheating. He argues that a teacher beating a student is a bad look, so Song Wenba pivots, suggesting the teacher provide one-on-one guidance to a student instead. Gua Haibao waves him off, deciding it isn't worth the trouble since the higher-ups likely already know about Lin Yufei's transfer anyway. He orders the ranking to be deleted and a formal statement issued, clarifying that the competition is strictly limited to their own current students. Meanwhile, back at the new school, the atmosphere is electric. Lin Yufei has tied for first in class and third in the entire grade. As everyone stares at him with pure envy, the teacher explains that while individual subject scores will be handed out later, there is a surprise. The teacher announces that the top Chinese score in the entire grade belongs to someone in their very classroom, sending a wave of excitement through the room. Jiang Shiqi glances back at him, but Lin Yufei just waves it off, insisting he only ranked fourth, or so he thought, anyway. A second later, Liang Yuding smiles and confirms it is indeed Lin Yufei, causing every head in the room to turn toward him in shock. A few classmates look confused, clearly remembering him just claiming he had only come in fourth place. When it's confirmed he is number one in the grade, thunderous applause breaks out, and even when Mengqi looks at him with newfound admiration. He rubs his nose, humbly chalking it up to luck. He can hardly tell them he's essentially repeating his life, after all. Teacher Liang tells them the Chinese teacher will discuss his perfect score essay later. Meanwhile, at the first high school, exams are being returned. Students are buzzing over a 53-point essay, but the teacher suddenly sighs, looking thoroughly disappointed with the overall results. She notes that despite knowing the essay topics in advance, a huge number of students still only manage to score in the high 40s. The teacher turns her attention to Sun Fei, asking how he fared, and he can only lower his head in complete embarrassment. Sun Fei stammers that his results weren't great, and the teacher sighs, noting it was a waste since he used to sit next to Lin Yufei. Sun Fei tries to claim that Lin Yufei wasn't good at Chinese either, but teacher Lu calmly retorts that while she transferred, her talent remains undeniable. We learn that in the four-school joint exam, Lin Yufei actually ranked fourth in Chinese and scored full marks on her essay, leaving Sun Fei speechless. He can only stare in stunned silence as the reality of the gap between them sinks in. Sun Fei doesn't know whether to laugh or cry, thinking about how Lin Yufei spent his time running an online shop and going on movie dates. As the final bell rings, we find Lin Yufei standing by the stairs, looking at the grade rankings posted in the hallway. Jiang Shiqi and Wen Mengqi stand beside him, marveling at his scores, first in Chinese, third in math, and third in English. His science scores were a bit lower, placing him 10th overall in the grade, which Jiang Shiqi still finds incredibly impressive. Lin Yufei muses that if he could just pull up his science score, he'd be set. In his past life, science and math were his strengths. However, subjects like chemistry and biology require memorizing hard facts, things he completely forgot in the years after his original graduation. So, having been reborn, he feels these scores are quite decent, especially since his core subjects far exceed his previous life's performance. When Mengqi points out her own name on the list and tugs at his sleeve, wanting him to acknowledge her hard work. Our little heiress, Wen Mengqi, is ranked 41st. She points at her science score with a proud, slightly boastful look on her face. Lin Yufei smiles and playfully pinches her nose, telling her she's done well, but suggests she should aim even higher. He tells her to skip the Shanghai Conservatory and aim for Yanjing instead, so they can stay together, prompting a surprised look from Jiang Shiqi. She asks if he plans to study in Yanjing and which school he's targeting. He answers, quite naturally, that he's aiming for Tsinghua or Peking University. A stunned when Mengqi asks how he knew she was planning on the Shanghai Conservatory in the first place. Relying on his memories, he knows that's exactly where she went last time, and while it's a top school, he has much bigger plans now. As a regressor, he knows the diploma, social circles, and future opportunities at the country's absolute top universities are on a different level entirely. Besides, the college entrance exam is where his current advantage is strongest. Once he's in university, he'll have to rely on his knowledge of the future. He knows that building a business requires foresight. Once these few years pass, changing one's life will become infinitely harder, making every single day feel absolutely critical. Writing novels seemed like the safest bet, since he knows which works will become hits, but relying solely on memory might not be enough to perfectly recreate those classics. With the financial backing of his little heiress friend, he realizes that e-commerce might actually be a much smoother shortcut toward his ultimate success. The next morning, as soon as he arrives at school, he receives a call from his Chinese teacher, Luo Wenxuan, asking him to stop by the office. He hurries back to the classroom to drop off his bag, only to find another breakfast waiting on his desk, just as Xinxinhua runs over with a beaming smile. She asks why he bought another one when she already got him breakfast, then leans in to whisper magic underwear, before giggling and retreating to her seat. It turns out she had seen Zheng Yensong's social media post about packing logistics yesterday and sent him a private message to dig for more details. She was surprised to learn how much had been happening behind her back, but Lin Yufei simply chuckles and tells her to keep it a secret. Shun Xinhua happily swaps the breakfasts, insisting he eat hers and threatening to expose his secret if he gives this one to Wen Mengqi again. Lin Yufei frowns playfully, asking if she's actually threatening him, but she just pouts, saying she only wants him to eat the breakfast she bought. She knows he gave the last one to Wenmingqi and that they went to the movies on Saturday. She wonders why he won't give her a chance instead. She has always had a crush on top students, and after his performance in the four-school exam, her interest in him has reached an all-time high. Even though they were primary school classmates and he once pursued her friend, she doesn't care, especially since Chun Sairu said they were never official. There was a bit of ambiguity back then, sure, but now that he's blocked her, Shin Xinyue feels there is nothing standing in her way. She is quite confident that she's prettier and more outgoing than Wenmingqi, and she refuses to believe she can't win against such a quiet girl. Lin Yufei gives her a challenge. If she blocks Chun Sairu and gets into a top university, he'll consider it, just as the first bell rings for class. The physics teacher, Nanguishin, enters the room and tells everyone to take out their papers before scanning the room and calling out for Lin Yufei. When he raises his hand, the teacher jokingly asks if he has a grudge against physics, since his Chinese, math, and English scores were all so high. The teacher begins explaining the exam with high efficiency, and by the second period, we see school officials conducting an inspection in the hallways. One of the leaders stops at the classroom door, asking the staff to point out the student they were just discussing. The transfer student from the first middle school is in this very class, and right on cue, the dean, Lu Xiaoping, walks over with a smile to greet the physics teacher. He calls out for Lin Yufei to step outside, and as our protagonist stands up, he is instantly the focus of every single eye in the room while he slowly exits the classroom. Once outside, he politely nods to the group, offering a respectful greeting to the teachers. Dean Lu tells him not to be nervous, introducing the man beside him as Director Song from the Provincial Education Bureau. He explains that the others are also leaders from the bureau, and Director Song asks with a chuckle if he is indeed the author who wrote that post on the school forum about a friend dropping out. The director praises him, noting that since he transferred from the first middle school, he must have a unique understanding of how both schools operate, and his grades are quite impressive too. Director Song begins to ask if the transfer was due to a certain reason, but Dean Lu quickly jumps in to explain that it was because of a fight, a classic case of a young man's temper, really. The dean is quick to add that despite that little spark of temper, the boy's academic performance is excellent, and he was a top student back at the first middle school as well.